Now I'm going to be singing Phil Collins songs in my head.
Well, there you go.
And welcome to College Football Now. I'm Brant Phil Collins Parsons, and this is Matt Peter Gabriel Michelle, if you're listening to us before the show. We are live and also on Facebook Live. If you're following us on Facebook Live, I have this little doohickey here.
Yes.
You can ask us questions throughout the show, and we'll get to them.
Interact, be part of the show, join us.
Make us better by being you.
Yes.
Matt, last week we did some picks. I said I was going to help you out, and I did. We are now tied for the season in picks, as I got all the ones we disagreed on wrong last week.
That just goes to show you, quit disagreeing with me.
But I
agree with everything I say, and you won't have a problem.
But it was rigged, and I'm not accepting.
No,
the results.
We're not going there. We're not going there.
Not accepting the results. It's a bunch of losers.
You never said any of those things, right?
UCF is at Houston on Saturday, 12 p.m. on ESPNU. The Cougars won last year at UCF's homecoming, 59-10. UCF comes in fresh off a win over UConn this past weekend. Houston have fallen a bit on sorts. They started the year beating Oklahoma, had huge aspirations for what they were going to do this year. They're still good against the run. They average allow less than 100 yards per game. UCF will try to run the ball. They're averaging almost 190 yards per game. Greg Ward Jr. is their man on offense, their quarterback. Combined 19 touchdowns on the season. And I'm going out on a limb here, and I'm taking UCF to win this game. I picked UCF to lose to UConn, but I saw something in that game, and it's the way they responded from being down, coming back from being down 13 points, long drives, sustained drives, and then the defense showing up in the second half to give them the win. And Houston, after having so much to play for, they've now lost twice to SMU, to Navy. They're struggling in this game. UCF goes to Houston and pulls a stunner.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Houston on this one. Last week I picked.
Oh, come on.
I picked UCF to beat, UConn in the civil conflict, which wasn't much of a conflict. And, this week I just think Houston bounces back. I think, you look at what's happened the last couple games with them. They've had over a dozen players at one point injured, or at one point or another injured this year. The offense hasn't, really gelled as much as I think they thought it was going to. There's a lot of off-the-field distractions. Tom Herman's name continues to be thrown around when you're looking at coach openings, places at LSU, even Texas, which doesn't even have an opening. His name's been mentioned as well. Very emotional interview this week where he said basically he's not going to pay attention to those kind of rumors. So I think they're there, and I think he's heard them. I think he wants to put that to rest for right now. I think he wants his team to step up and perform. And I like what Greg Ward has done so far this year. I know he hasn't looked good at times. He's made some mental mistakes. But I think, again, being at home, I like Houston in this game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I think it's going to be a lot closer game than most people would assume. But I think the Cougars pulled this one out. Again, these are, as we keep talking about week in and week out with UCF, these are building block games. And going on the road facing a team like Houston is only going to help them get better, especially as we wind out the year with about a month left of football to play. They're going to need these kind of opportunities to get better as a team.
A tale of two teams. Houston last year, of course, the memorable season. UCF, an immemorable season. And coming into this, Houston obviously with the high expectations, struggling. UCF on the rise up, and it'll be an interesting game to watch on Saturday. Another interesting game to watch on Saturday at the Gator Bowl. Florida and Georgia meet at 3:30 on CBS. Coming in this game, Florida and Michigan are the only two teams in the country that have held 4 FBS opponents under 125 yards passing this season. Jacob Eason is a freshman quarterback starter for the Bulldogs and is 3-3. He did put up some numbers against Vanderbilt, a game the Bulldogs lost. The Gators suddenly, not surprisingly, find themselves in the driver's seat for the SEC East. Even with the loss to Tennessee, they are now ahead of Tennessee in the loss column with only one loss. This is one of their big games against Georgia. The Gators, the offense is starting to click at times. It's still painful to watch, but it'll be painless to watch, at least for a little bit. The offense will do enough. Florida will beat Georgia in this game.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Florida wins this game. I like what they've done defensively. The Gators have 10 interceptions this season. 2 of those were returned for touchdowns last game against Missouri. Georgia's a team that I think a lot of us had picked a little bit overhyped. A lot of us had them going up maybe top 25 team. I don't think they're there yet. I think they need to kind of grow a little bit and develop under Kirby Smart. A little interesting stat in this game: the last 4 Florida victories, the Gators have rushed for over 200 yards in each of those games. So I think that's going to be crucial for this team again in this year. I think Jill McElwain needs to get the offense moving. He needs to get the running attack going. If they can pound out the ground and use the ground attack and really kind of put together some long drives, put together those 2.5, 3 minute, 4 minute drives, and eat up clock, I think that's going to help Florida. And I think that also keeps their defense fresh as they go out against a team, as you mentioned, with a young quarterback in Jacob Eason. They need to get to him as well, force him to make mistakes, force him to turn the ball over. I like Florida in this game. I think Florida wins the world's largest cocktail party. They don't call that anymore. Outdoor cocktail party. They don't call that anymore, but I think Florida wins this one.
There's still going to be lots of drinking. But before the show started, we were laughing and joking about being old in the '80s and talking about Genesis and Phil Collins.
Yes.
And the late '80s, there were some great football games between two teams that were playing this weekend. Memorable, life-affirming, just you never forget kind of football games. Mm-hmm. This week, not so much. Miami visits Notre Dame on Saturday. Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
I don't think, and again, I mean, you were there. You remember, as we talked about. Remember the Catholics versus convicts?
Oh, yes.
Because I was growing up near South Bend. There were a lot of kids who had those T-shirts walking around in high school. Were wearing those T-shirts, and I remember how big this game and how big these series was for Notre Dame during the late '80s, early '90s, and that quickly went away once the series kind of stopped for a bit. And now they're hoping to get it back. I don't think we're going to see that so much this weekend.
Notre Dame pulled a Florida and stopped playing Miami. Yes, I grew up in Miami. They like those convicts and Catholic shirts too because they are proud of who we are from Miami. But this game takes place Saturday at Notre Dame, 3:30 kickoff on NBC. Notre Dame just a complete and total struggle right now. May not even make a bowl game. I mean, they're in trouble. Miami comes into this game after looking promising early. They've lost 3 straight games. And the only note I took on this one was Mark Richt in his 203 games coaching. He's only had 1 4-game losing streak as a head coach. That's how quickly Miami has fallen. Of course, against Virginia Tech, that was shocking to me. I thought Miami was going to be able to rebound. Florida State, okay, I can understand North Carolina, but then go on the road and look as lifeless as they did at times against Virginia Tech. But they get a lifeless team now in South Bend. I'm taking Miami in this game. And I can remember when my entire college football season was based around watching this game. I might check it out, but Miami goes into South Bend and wins this game and sends Notre Dame even closer to just a complete tailspin this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Miami wins this game. I mean, I like what Mark Richt has been able to do. I understand what's happened the last 3 games. One of the things we talked about last week's show was they need to get back to establishing the running game. That's something that I think that's helped them out. When they jumped out to that 4-0 start, they need to get those guys going. They need to get the rushing attack going because I think what's happening now is too much of the emphasis is falling on Brad Kai's shoulders to step up and make those plays. And I just don't think, you're asking a guy to do way too much than he needs to do. We talk about defensively, they've lost some key components to injury. I think that's hurt them out as well. They're going to facing a wounded Notre Dame team that's, desperate to try to get to be bowl eligible, that needed the athletic director, Jack Swarbrick, to come out last week and say, no, Brian Kelly's going to lead this team next year, coming out of the tunnel, reaffirming the old, giving the old endorsement right now. I don't know if that was good or bad what Notre Dame fans were thinking. So I think this is I think if you're Brian Kelly, this is a rebuilding year. I know people don't like to hear that, but this is where you go in and you try to kind of rebound and figure out what can you do to get better next year. I think you want to see some of your younger players start playing some games. You look at the remainder schedule for Notre Dame, it's going to be really tough. They still, they've got some big games still on the schedule, USC as one of them. I don't think they get this win. I think Miami comes in and gets the win. I think Miami's not really now, after that loss to Virginia Tech, in the running for the Coastal. So I think if you're Rick, you've got to focus on other factors, which is getting to a better bowl game.
And building towards your
second
year as a head coach. The big game this weekend in the state, a game you're going to on Saturday night up in Tallahassee. Number 3, Clemson visits number 12, Florida State. Each of the last 7 years, the team that has won this game has won the Atlantic Division Championship. And the last 5 years, the winner of this game has won the ACC Championship. Clemson comes into this game with some close calls this season, including just a a terrible kick by NC State that sent their game with Clemson into overtime, where Clemson ended up pulling out. Florida State, we've talked in depth on their issues this year and their trials and tribulations, but they get Clemson at home. Clemson struggling. I almost pulled the trigger on this, but I'm going to say Clemson in this one because they've been spending too much.
I think, I'm taking Clemson in this game as well. I had the Tigers, winning it all at the beginning of the year. So, I'm kind of obligated in some ways to pick them. But I like what Clemson's done so far. I mean, listen, Florida State defensively has done better the last 2 weeks after there was all that, after they lost that tough game to North Carolina. There was a lot of people calling for Charles Kelly, the defensive coordinator's head. They kind of rebounded, and they've done a good job. I think they only allowed 250 yards per game, again, in wins against Miami and Wake Forest. They've gotten better. But now you're facing a Clemson team that sees the finish line. They see the idea that they can control the ACC. They win the Atlantic. They're back in the title game. They get a chance to take on who knows out of the Coastal. But they're still in the mix for the college football playoff. So I think this is a focused Clemson team. I think they know they can win on the road. I think Deshaun Watson, who has struggled at times, is going to have a pretty good game going forward. He just can't turn the ball over, and I think that's been some of the issues they've had. They get Wayne Gallman back. He comes back after that brutal hit from NC State, the Clemson running back. So I think all the pieces will be there. I think the defense is there as well. Clemson wins. If Clemson doesn't win, this is a bad case scenario for the ACC because all of a sudden you're looking at a possibility of having a three-way tie in the Atlantic, and that involves some sort of weirdness where they pull a name out of a hat, or I don't know. It's some sort of deal with how many players are ranked by this and that. I don't think the ACC wants that. They want Clemson to take care of this.
You know who the Big 12 is rooting for in this one?
Yes, Florida State.
Florida State, because Clemson loses this one.
I think the Big 12 and the Pac-12 would be.
Might be, and Pac-12 probably.
It would be as well, because again, I think if I don't know how far if Clemson were to lose would drop them out of the rankings, but I think again a loss is always going to be tough for them.
You wrote about it. We've talked about this as a big weekend across the state, and one more game in the state of note. Number 22 Navy visits Tampa to play USF on a Friday night game. Midshipmen 11-1 since joining the American in conference play. Just amazing.
You would
stuff.
think that Mike Oresco knew something when he invited Navy to come in and join the conference, wouldn't you?
Yeah, they certainly look like the right choice now. Navy has a 14-game home win streak. This is on the road, but they keep winning games. They have win streaks across, and part of that is it is hard to prepare for Navy.
Which is funny because Navy has run the same offense for decades, it feels like, and yet teams still can't figure a way to handle it.
And so USF on a short week has to get ready for Navy, and I see Navy coming in and winning in Tampa. And Navy, even with their loss to Air Force, as these group of 5 teams, if some of them start losing, which I don't know if Boise State does or Western Michigan, but if any of those happen, Navy starts getting themselves into the talk of being that group of 5 representative. Navy knocks off USF on Friday.
Wouldn't that be incredible to think to have Navy in the group of 5 in the New Year's Six game? I mean, talk about what 2 or 3 years ago Navy was just maybe a good 8 or 9 win team. Now to have them possibly in the mix.
Second straight year that Navy's been in the top 25.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great job
since like the '60s that they've had 2 straight years. It's a great job
considering when I think all service academies do a wonderful job in college football. You think about it, because it's a different beast than it is like with the Alabamas and the Michigans. You're not doing your football team isn't put together for, so to say, to win those national titles. That being said, I'm taking USF in this game. I like what the Bulls are doing. I think last week was a difficult game for them. They're giving up way too many yards on the ground, but Quentin Flowers out as one of 2 quarterbacks to rush for over 700 yards so far this season. The other one is a guy named Lamar Jackson. So
he's pretty good.
I like what Flowers has been able to do. Marlon Mack is another top running back for the team. They've done a good job putting up points. They just need to contain Navy's offense. This game's at home. I like USF in a close one to pull this game out and to still be in the mix for the possible. This could be a preview of the American Conference Championship game.
And one of the many games I got wrong last week was Auburn and Arkansas. The Tigers played maybe the most complete game a college football team has played this year, beat Arkansas 56-3. They visit Ole Miss on Saturday. Auburn's now won 4 straight games. They've worked their way up to number 15 in the top 25. This is a team that I left for dead early in the year. They've held 7 of their last 8 opponents under 20 points. 3 of their top 10 games in history on offense have come this season. They've got 632, 688, 706 in total yards in 3 different games. And on the other side, you have Ole Miss. They have 4 losses, but all of those losses have come against top 25 teams. Ole Miss facing a brunt of the schedule and not doing well against it. 3-4 in a year, 1-4 against top 25 teams. This is the 6th team they will play against the top 25. And last week I was talking about how Ole Miss was great, and they were the second best team in the SEC West.
Let's roll that tape, shall we?
And this week I'm picking Auburn. I'm picking Auburn without even a hesitation. It's War Eagle all over.
Listen, I mean, one of the best coaching jobs we've seen so far this year was by Gus Malzahn, who went out and basically bit the bullet and handed the keys to the offense over to Rhett Lachey. And then I think that's been the best move possible, because since then they've gone 4-0. They've looked really impressive. And I mean, nothing to take away from Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is just hitting the rough part of their schedule. I think they're ever been able to handle it. You saw last week, I mean, the blocking that LSU was able to do. I mean, Leonard Fournette had a field day against them. I think the same sort of thing is going to happen again with Auburn. I think they're hitting their stride. This is a team that I can see right now, if they continue to play this way, finishing second in the West, which I wouldn't have said at the beginning of the year, because I really felt like Auburn had some major holes. But now I think this team is clicking on all cylinders. I think they get the win this week. I think they continue to move their way up. And it's amazing to think that after 3 games, we're 1-2, and we thought this team was done for. And Gus Malzahn was on the hot seat. And now Gus Malzahn has found his way, probably one of the best coaching jobs he's been able to do.
And maybe Alabama's toughest opponent down the
Yes,
stretch.
in fact, and if
that
outside
Iron Bowl
of
is looking a lot,
exactly, when you look at the
bigger
Iron
now.
Bowl now, all of a sudden that Iron Bowl becomes really key, because that's a game so late in the season. If you lose that game, if you're Alabama, that knocks you out of that really will probably knock you out of the top 4.
Auburn would make the SEC title
Yes,
if Auburn
would
wins
make
out.
the SEC title game, and then that would change up maybe who the SEC sends to the playoff, depending on where they're ranked.
Shouldas and couldas and wouldas. We'll see what happens. But this week we both have Auburn beating Ole Miss, a team that is not getting enough attention. We're going to focus on them right now, though. Number 10 West Virginia hits the road, play Oklahoma State, 12 p.m. start on Fox on Saturday. They've won 7 in a row, 11-12. Skylar Howard, Shelton Gibson, a great quarterback receiver duo. But the story out of West Virginia that is not getting, I think, enough play is what Dana Holgorsen and the defense have done. We knew what he could do on offense, and when he got to West Virginia, the offense was great to watch, and the defense would give up 80 points and they'd lose games. They held TCU to 10 points last weekend. This is a West Virginia team. It was at home, but this is a West Virginia team that knows how to make things happen on defense. They're holding opponents to under 18 points per game, which is unheard of in the Big 12. They have the brunt of their schedule still to come. TCU was their first big test, and they get Mason Rudolph, who has thrown just 2 interceptions this season. Oklahoma State at home. This is the next test for West Virginia. But all along, and I was one of them, I said, well, West Virginia, it's a nice little start, undefeated. This is Baylor's to lose in the Big 12. West Virginia now, I think, can almost be on par with Baylor. If the defense keeps playing the way they are, I say they go in to Stillwater and knock off Oklahoma State. I got West Virginia winning this one.
Yeah, this is a good story. I mean, this is another coach. We talked about Gus Malzahn being on the hot seat a little bit. I think Dana Holgorsen was a little bit on the hot seat coming into the season. I think people expected more out of West Virginia, especially how efficient their offenses looked. But the defense has really stood up. Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator, has done an amazing job with them as well. And that being said, I'm going to pick Oklahoma State to win this game. Listen, the Cowboys have done an amazing job. They lead the Big 12 with 16 turnovers forced. I think they take advantage of the situation. They also have 5 block kicks so far this season. I think all those factors, plus the fact it's in Stillwater, I think they win. I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Oklahoma State pulls out the win. Listen, West Virginia controls its own destiny in this situation, because they face Baylor and Oklahoma later on in the season. If they beat Oklahoma State this weekend, then they can decide who wins the Big 12. But I just don't think, having what they've said, having what we've been able to say, I'm not sure at some point along they're not going to have a hiccup, and I think this is one of the hiccups.
The possibly most consequential game in the Pac-12 takes place this weekend. USC's not playing in it. UCLA's not playing in it. Stanford's not playing in it. Oregon's not playing in it. No schools from Arizona are playing in it. Number 4 Washington visits number 17 Utah on Saturday afternoon, and College Game Day actually going to Utah on this one. That's how big this game is. And the key in this game is going to be turnovers. And just looking at some of the stats, Washington leads the nation in fumbles recovery and turnover margin. Utah leads the nation in interceptions. and they're going up against a pretty good quarterback. Jake Browning for Washington has thrown 26 touchdown passes. He is second in all of FBS in passing efficiency. But this is a road game. It's going to be a tough place for Washington to go and play. And Utah has shown the ability to grind out wins, and this place is going to be rocking and crazy. As rocking and crazy as Utah can be. Just a little dig there to my Utah friends. They know it's all with good love. But Washington goes. I think Washington goes in and wins a close one. But this game is going to be fun to watch, and it is the one I'm looking forward to most this weekend. And if you haven't seen the Huskies play, and I know some folks are doubting that they're the number 4 team, they're good. This is a very good football team, both offensively and defensively. They're going to show it on Saturday in Utah.
Yeah, I think this is a game. You talked about how Washington is one of those surprise teams a little bit. I mean, listen, Jake Browning was in this week's my Heisman watch this week. I mean, you look at a guy who's done an amazing job throwing the football, 26 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. I mean, he's rewriting the Washington record books as a quarterback. I think offensively they've really kind of hit their peak. They're averaging over 35 points per game this season, which is a school record at some regards. And you look at what they've been able to do. This is a game, they have 3 games on their schedule that will really test them. It'll be Utah, it'll be USC, and it'll be Washington State. So this is the first big test because it's on the road. I think Washington wins this game. Listen, Utah's having a great season. Joe Williams coming out of retirement last week. What did he rush for over 300 yards, 200-some yards? I think Washington's defensive front is really stellar. It's one of the reasons why they are where they're at. I think they'll get pressure on the quarterback. I think they'll contain Joe Williams, and I think Washington wins this one. It may be close because it's on the road, but I think Washington wins and moves on and shows everyone that they deserve to be where they should be.
One more game to pick. We have a Facebook comment from Brad Oversmith who says Washington is good, better than Clemson, but he says, come on, give my Wolverines their props for the best defense in the country. And when we talk about Michigan, but they're playing Michigan State, and no one cares because Michigan State's terrible. Go on.
I had one of my games I picked this week was to watch was the Michigan State. Someone asked me, how can you, because Michigan State's so bad? Because all I have to do is remind everyone, Michigan was 10 seconds away from beating Michigan State last year, and then it wasn't for that block kick and their fumble recovery in the end zone. Michigan would have, who knows where Michigan would have been playing last year. So
Ohio State would have been in the playoff.
That's right. Well, there you go. But Michigan has done a really good job, especially defensively. Don Brown, who came in as their defensive coordinator, come over from Boston College, has done an amazing job. I think Michigan has blocked something like 3 or 4 kicks this year. Special teams play has been outstanding. We're seeing the offense starting to really get gel. Michigan is right there as well, especially now that Ohio State suffered that loss last week. They're going to be mentioned as well. I think Michigan really doesn't run into trouble until they play Ohio State.
Yep, so there you go, Brad. We talked about Michigan.
That's a bonus game we picked.
It's a bonus game because Michigan State is just
awful.
Just awful. They're like Notre Dame awful. But we still talked about them still playing Miami. Our last game that we're going to talk about before we go to our Twitter questions, and if you have any Facebook questions, get on Facebook Live, and certainly you can ask them. But we're going to talk Nebraska at Wisconsin. Nebraska, number 7 in the country.
Who would have thought?
I quit. I am done procrastinating. Nebraska, number 7 in the country. Something is wrong. But wait till I pick them in this game. This is the 5th top 10 opponent this season for Wisconsin, though one of those doesn't really get credit because it's Michigan State and they're terrible. Nebraska has only played one top 25 team, and that was Oregon. They're terrible, so you can't really give them much credit for that. This is Nebraska's first test, but over their last 11 games, the Cornhuskers are 10-1. This is their best stretch in 7 years for Nebraska. Wisconsin, we know what they're capable of doing. They're just a solid football team, offensively, defensively. Corey Clement has had 2 straight 100-yard games. But the reason I'm picking Nebraska in this one, and Jack Cichy, is that how you say his last name?
Yes.
They're beast of a defender who was the player of the game against Ohio State, caused havoc all game. He's out for the year with a torn pectoral muscle. You look across the injury report for Wisconsin, and they're decimated on defense. They've got guys that are injured that are playing, some that aren't playing, so they're going to be struggling on defense. Tommy Armstrong Jr. takes advantage of that. Nebraska, I've picked all road teams this weekend. I'm going to do it on this one. The Cornhuskers, number 7 in the country. Someone's got them getting it done. They go in and beat Wisconsin.
I think if I look at Nebraska as a team that's, I'm just not sure exactly who this team is. They're the ones that are they really the 7th best team in the country? And you look at what they've been able to say, and I keep stumbling around, and I'm waiting for something to happen there. So I like Wisconsin. I know they've got injuries, and I know they got injuries in the injury front, but I think that the defense has been outstanding. I think what they've been able to do this season has been good. This is really the game for the Big Ten West, if you think about it. Unless Northwestern can pull out something, at the very end, I think this is going to be the game where Iowa. I think this game is going to decide it. I like what Wisconsin has faced because of the schedule. I think it's going to help them. I think what also helps them is they're at home. Camp Randall is such a hard place to win at. Obviously, Ohio State was able to do it, but it took them overtime to have it happen. So, I think Wisconsin wins this game. I think Nebraska's a good story because I think after last season, they had 5 games that were decided by 7 points or less. I mean, Mike Riley had a really tough start from it. I think at the end of last year, people really questioned, was he really the right fit for this program? And this year, I think he's proven that he's been able to do. The offense has played a lot better. I think the defense is stepping up. So we know that now he's starting to get his footing at that program. That's good news because I think anytime you keep Nebraska up in the national landscape, you keep seeing their name. I think it's always good because they were always a traditional powerhouse going back for decades.
And before we go, we do have 2 Twitter questions. You can ask us questions all week long on Twitter, and we'll answer them if we like them on the show or if they give us a chance.
We decide.
They give us a chance to look smart and knowledgeable. But the first question comes from Elliot Wees, ND Fan H1. He has 2 tweets. They're both to you in the history of his Twitter.
Make them make them count. If you're going to make them count.
That is making your tweets count.
Yes.
Which of the one-loss team has the best chance to make the playoffs? There's some notable one-loss teams. Ohio State joined the list of one-loss teams last week after losing at Penn State. Which of the one-loss teams, whichever, are you looking at as the best chance to make the playoffs?
It's got to be Ohio State at this point. I mean, maybe before they lost, you would say Louisville. But I think Ohio State, because they still control, as I said before, their own destiny. I mean, they can win the Big Ten East if they beat Michigan, more likely. And then if they get in the Big Ten title game and they win the Big Ten title game, that should be enough to put them in the playoffs. So as big, as the impact of a loss that was to Penn State for them, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. Now Louisville's case, I mean, they need Florida State to win this weekend. They need to kind of be in that.
Well, then they need Clemson to lose.
They need Clemson to lose the game. So it becomes more of an issue of where you're going to find them at. So I think Ohio State was the one-loss teams is where they're going to be at. Now again, I mean, we look at like if Washington were to lose this weekend, so there's always a possibility moving forward. But for me right now, Ohio State's the team.
And I have to agree. I can't think of another one-loss team. Well, I think the biggest gift for Ohio State was they only dropped to 6 in the rankings, which was shocking. You lose to Penn State.
You could say
really
Texas A&M. I mean, because A&M. But I mean,
the problem again, A&M. You have the same problem you have with Louisville.
Yes, you have to.
If Alabama wins out, Texas A&M's not in the SEC title game. If Clemson wins out, Louisville, as good as they are and as great as Lamar Jackson
and you got to finish
they're
strong.
On the outside looking in, and they're not going to take the playoff is. They're not going to take a team that didn't even make the conference championship game over a conference champion.
And like I said, unless there's some weirdness where somehow someone gets it, Alabama loses the game they're not supposed to lose to an unranked opponent or something, but that's not happening this year.
So I would say I have to agree with you right now. Probably the only one-loss team, and it'll change. There'll be more one-loss teams. Yeah. Right now, Ohio State in the best position. Next question from William Deeney, Master Billy Q. Says, in your opinion, what first-year coach has had the best season so far and made the biggest impact on their new team?
Wow, best first-year coach to do that. I know, man, I think Jay Norville, maybe at Memphis, has done a pretty good job there. I think they're either 5-1, or 5-2. I mean, they've come out strong. I would throw Scott Frost in the mix, from UCF. I mean, I know they're 4-3, and but I mean, again, where I thought they were going to be at to where they're at now, I think the team has played better than what they should have been. Nick Rolovich from Hawaii, we were talking about earlier today, has done an amazing job. I mean, Hawaii, considering where Hawaii had to start in Australia and then travel all the way to Ann Arbor and suffered the first 2 losses, then has bounced back to be 4-4, beating Air Force past week. I mean, to me, that's incredible. And Troy, Neil Brown, but that's not first-year coach, so I guess I have to put that. He would be a second-year. But so those are kind of what I would consider teams that were set up. Norville's thing with Memphis is he left the program. When he got to the program, they were in good shape because of Justin Fuente. It wasn't like he had to look at Scott Frost. Scott Frost came to a program that was going through a winless season, and he was able to kind of transform the program to where they're at as well. So that's where I'd probably put as one of the first-year coaches that have done that.
And I would probably go with Frost too, but Justin Fuente also first-year coach.
Yes,
at Virginia
I'm sorry,
Tech.
Justin Fuente
Just what
would
he's
be-
been able to
you
do
know
at
what,
Virginia Tech, and that turnaround has been pretty good this season.
Yeah, and you know who else I would throw in there too? I'd throw in Ed Orgeron, even though he's not a first-year coach, because if you think about what he's been able to do so far, pretty impressive wins, you know. But yeah, Justin Fuente, to have Virginia Tech on the cusp of having them ranked again, especially coming in and replacing a legendary coach, like Frank Beamer, it's always going to be tough, and he's been able to get that program there. They looked impressive against Miami last week.
LSU off the vacancy when it's all played out if LSU keeps playing the way they're playing.
Yeah, I think if he can, even if he doesn't beat Alabama, if they're just competitive and they win out the remainder of their games, I think they got to give it to Ed Orgeron. I mean, because I think what they'll look at is, listen, Jimbo Fisher's a pipe dream. There's too much money. I mean, I think we saw today $33 million for a buyout, and LSU doesn't have that kind of money, no way near that kind of money. I think Tom Herman has lost a little bit of luster, and you're hearing that he may go to Texas if it comes down to it. I just think when you look around, who's out there, I think you could get Ed Orgeron for a steal, and he would do a great job, and I think the fans love him, and he's a Baton Rouge guy, and I think that's a very important thing for that program.
And I will say before we finish, that game for Florida seems a lot harder now than if they had been able to play him earlier. By the time Florida and LSU meets, if LSU keeps building off how they're playing, that game changed. The whole complexity of that game just changed.
Think about what Jim McElwain must be thinking. At one point, you're okay. If we play LSU right when this whole thing happens,
yeah, at home,
they could beat LSU. That's a winnable game. Now they go on the road, and you see how well and now you got Leonard Fournette running last week, rushed for over 250 yards. This is Jim McElwain's worst nightmare because you're competing for the East. So you got this team, you got a wounded Arkansas team which really wants to get back to things. They're going to face them next week, and you got Georgia. So this is a really tough 3 or 4 game stretch for Florida that they would have had maybe if LSU played earlier on.
Yeah, the game looks a lot tougher now than it did a couple weeks ago. For Matt Michelle, I'm Brent Parsons. Thanks for watching. We do this every Wednesday at 3:30 at OrlandoSentinel.com. Send your questions in and keep sending us all the nice notes on Twitter.
Happy Halloween, everyone, because we won't be
Yes.
here next week.
Yeah, because